This horse and his rider are about to make history. It's the first official race of both their careers, and the odds are stacked hard against them. Nobody believes in this pair. But the strangest part of what's about to happen won't be that they win against all expectations. The truly impossible part of that, for most of the race, the rider was already dead. This anomaly would make him the first, and so far the only, corpse ever to win an official sporting competition. And it gets stranger, because this wasn't a flat sprint down a straightaway. To win, the horse had to clear 12 fences across 2 full miles, 12 jumps that a dead man somehow rode through without ever leaving the saddle. By the end of this, you'll understand exactly how that was possible, and you'll hear about the one other time in sports history that something almost as impossible happened. A world champion crowned weeks after he had already been buried. Frank Hayes was born in Ireland, and he came up through the stables, not the saddle. By trade, he was a horse trainer and a stable hand, the man who raised the animals, fed them, and learned their habits before sunrise. He had never won a race. By most accounts, he had never seriously ridden one that counted. The dream was always the saddle, but Hayes spent his days at the rail, watching other men climb onto horses he had trained and ride off with all the credit. Then, in the spring of 1923, a 7-year-old mare named Sweet Kiss put the saddle within reach and set the most macabre afternoon in racing history in motion. Sweet Kiss was a nobody. Her own owner, Miss A.M. Frayling, thought so little of her that even the people closest to the horse didn't rate her chances. But Frayling had entered the mare in a steeplechase at New York's Belmont Park, and with the race almost upon her, she still had no experienced jockey willing to take the ride. Hayes volunteered. He had never competed in his life, but he knew this horse better than anyone alive. And there was one thing standing between him and the starting line. It would very nearly kill him before the race did. Jockeys ride light. The reason is brutal but simple. Every pound on the rider's back is a pound the horse drags over 2 miles of dirt and fences. Reports at the time put Hayes at around 142 pounds. To make the weight for this race, he had to come in near 130, stripping roughly a dozen pounds off his frame in a matter of days. What he reportedly did to get there reads like self-destruction. He ran. He sweated through layers of clothing. He went without food and, according to several accounts, without a single drop of water. By race morning, the scale said he was eligible, but the man stepping onto the track was hollowed out, dehydrated, and running on nothing. Other riders in the weighing room remembered him upbeat anyway. According to them, he said it was a good day to make history. He had no idea how literally those words were about to come true. There's even a discrepancy in the records about how old he was that afternoon. Some newspapers list him at 22. Others put him at 35. Either age was young for what was about to happen to his heart. When the gate opened, the favorite was a horse named Gimme, and Gimme went off like a shot. Sweet Kiss, a long shot quoted by some bookmakers at 20-1, settled in behind. 2 miles, 12 fences, and it's here that the most unsettling detail of the whole story lives. As the field approached the final jump, observers later said they saw Sweet Kiss drift. A small, wrong swerve, the kind a horse makes when something on its back stops giving instructions. At the same moment, Hayes was seen to sway, slump forward, and then appear to steady himself. The mare cleared the last fence, and on the run to the wire, she somehow found another gear and pulled to the front. The crowd was already on its feet. They just had no idea what they were actually watching. Sweet Kiss crossed the line ahead in front of Gimme. The grandstand erupted. Frayling and the race officials moved in to lead the shocking new winner toward the circle. And only then did anyone understand why the rider hadn't climbed down. He couldn't. Reports say his body slid from the saddle roughly 100 yards past the finish and lay motionless on the track. The track physician, Dr. John Voorhees, reached him and confirmed there were no signs of life: a heart attack. But the most disturbing question about Frank Hayes isn't how he died, it's when. This is where the story stops being a curiosity and becomes a genuine medical mystery, one that, more than a century later, still has no clear answer. No one can say with certainty at what point on that track Frank Hayes actually died. Some accounts describe him swaying and recovering near that final fence, which would mean he was still alive, just barely, as Sweet Kiss made her move. Others, including the doctor who reached him, concluded the fatal heart attack struck somewhere in the body of the race itself. If that's true, then the man steering a half-ton animal over a fence and down the home stretch was, in those last seconds, already gone. The explanation most often repeated is a theory, not a proven fact, that the savage weight cut the day before, the starvation and the dehydration collided with the adrenaline of a real race and stopped the young heart in mid-stride. It fits. It has never been confirmed. Whether he crossed the line dead or dying, the results stood. The officials let the win count, and that is how Frank Hayes became the first, and so far the only, person in recorded sporting history credited with a victory he never lived to see. A man in racing skills, still upright in the saddle, first across the wire with no life left in him to know he'd won. 3 days later, Hayes was buried in Brooklyn, reportedly in the same scales he had worn for the first and last race of his life. And Sweet Kiss didn't escape the afternoon either. The public rechristened the mare Sweet Kiss of Death, and the name stuck so hard that, according to the lore around her, no jockey would agree to ride her again. She was quietly retired, undefeated in the only race anyone remembers, with lifetime earnings of under $2,000 and a nickname no animal would ever want. Frank Hayes is the only rider to win a horse race after death, but he's not the only athlete to win the single biggest prize of his life and never live to hold it. For that one, leave the dirty truck behind and drive to a circuit in Italy half a century later. Jochen Rindt was born in Germany in 1942 and orphaned as an infant when his parents were killed in a wartime bombing raid. Raised by his grandparents in Austria, he grew into exactly the kind of driver people couldn't look away from. Aggressive, sideways, always a heartbeat from disaster. By 1969, he had signed with Lotus, the team run by Colin Chapman, famous for building the fastest cars on the grid and just as famously, the most fragile and dangerous. The deal came with a warning that has since become legend. As a young Bernie Ecclestone reportedly framed it, with Lotus you had the best chance to win the championship and the best chance to die. Rindt is said to have understood the bargain perfectly. In his own words, "At Lotus, I can either be world champion or die." 1970 was supposed to be the year he collected on the first half of that deal. 5 Grand Prix wins in a row, a points lead so large the title looked inevitable. Then, on September 5, 1970, during practice for the Italian Grand Prix at Monza, he reportedly said something that reads now like a man hearing footsteps. "Things are going so well, it scares me." Minutes later, the car that was about to make him champion killed him. Breaking hard for the Parabolica, his Lotus failed. Accounts point to a suspension or brake shaft breakage, and the front of the car was torn away against an inadequate barrier. Here's the cruel part. Rindt wore his lap belt but, by several accounts, refused the crotch straps, afraid of being trapped if the car ever caught fire. With nothing holding him down, the forces of the crash dragged him beneath the belts, and the buckle inflicted fatal injuries to his throat and chest. He was 28. One of the first to reach the wreck was Ecclestone, his friend and manager, who reportedly walked away from it carrying only a battered helmet and a single shoe, thrown clear of the car. And the coincidence borders on eerie. Rindt died at nearly the exact spot where his boyhood hero, Wolfgang von Trips, had been killed in 1961, a driver who, like Rindt, had been leading the championship at the time of his death. What follows in the standings is the part that earns Rindt his place beside Frank Hayes. With 4 races left, Jackie X chased the points hard, winning 2 of the final 4, and still finished 5 short of Rindt's total. No one could catch a dead man. Jochen Rindt was declared the 1970 world champion, the only posthumous title holder in Formula One history. His wife, Nina, climbed the podium to accept the trophy he never got to lift. There's a final, colder footnote. Italian law of the era was so wary of deaths at the circuit that officials were reluctant to even declare Rindt dead on the grounds. A confirmed death could force the race to be cancelled and demand that someone be held at fault. So, according to those who were there, his own team quietly loaded up and left. Today, a corner at Austria's Red Bull Ring carries his name. 2 men, an ocean and half a century apart, both crossed the most important finish line of their lives without ever knowing they had won. One stayed upright in the saddle just long enough to beat the odds. The other built a lead so commanding that death itself couldn't overtake it in the standings. And it leaves behind a strange, uncomfortable question. If a victory can't be felt, or seen, or celebrated by the one who earned it, is it still a victory? Or is it just a line in a record book, waiting for the rest of us to argue over what it really means? If stories that sit right on the edge of the impossible are your thing, the next one will get under your skin even more. It's right here, and it's waiting for you. Subscribe and hit the bell so the next case finds you the moment it drops.